A 6-year-old girl walked up to a billionaire in the middle of an upscale shopping center, looked him dead in the eyes, and asked, "How much does a daddy cost?" "I have $47.32. What he did next didn't just change her life, it shattered everyone who heard the story. Before we begin, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? I want to know where in the world people still believe in the power of kindness. And if you're new here to Olivia the Storyteller, hit that subscribe button, because if this story doesn't make you feel something, I don't know what will. Let's go. Julian Ashford stood in the toy department of Harrington Center on December 23rd, surrounded by $500 robotic dinosaurs and designer dollhouses that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Christmas lights glittered overhead in patterns meant to evoke wonder, but all Julian felt was emptiness. The artificial pine scent pumped through the ventilation system made his head ache. Holiday music played from hidden speakers, the same cheerful songs that had been looping for weeks, each note grating against his nerves. He held his platinum credit card between his fingers, the metal cool and heavy, and stared at a remote-controlled car that promised to be the year's must-have gift. His son wouldn't care. Ethan hadn't cared about anything in months. Not since Grace died. Julian could buy everything in the store. Hell, he could buy the entire mall, but he couldn't buy what mattered. He couldn't purchase a single genuine smile from his 8-year-old son. Couldn't buy back the light that used to live in Ethan's eyes. The weight of that failure pressed down on his shoulders harder than any business deal ever had. He was one of the richest men in the state, and completely powerless where it counted. The irony tasted bitter on his tongue. Around him, families laughed and shopped, their joy feeling like an accusation. What was he even doing here? That's when he felt it, a small hand tugging on his expensive cashmere coat sleeve. The touch was hesitant but persistent. Julian looked down, irritation flashing across his face before he could stop it. He was ready to dismiss whoever was interrupting his miserable attempt at Christmas shopping, ready to brush off another person wanting something from him. But the words died in his throat. There stood a little girl who couldn't have been more than 6 years old, wearing a faded pink coat that was at least 2 sizes too big, the sleeves rolled up multiple times to expose her small hands. One of her shoes was held together with duct tape, not even fresh duct tape, but old gray strips that had lost their stickiness and curled at the edges. She clutched a piggy bank to her chest, the kind you could buy at a dollar store, covered in peeling flower stickers that looked like they'd been applied with careful, loving fingers. The girl's eyes were red-rimmed, the kind of red that came from crying recently and trying hard to stop. But there was something else in those hazel eyes, too. Determination. A desperate kind of hope that made Julian's chest tighten. A dirt smudge marked one of her cheeks, and her brown hair had been braided, but the braids were messy, coming loose, like someone had done them in a hurry or without practice. The little girl looked up at him with those enormous eyes and said, in a voice that shook but didn't break, "Excuse me, sir, you look really rich. Can you tell me how much a daddy costs? I've been saving." She shook her piggy bank, and coins rattled inside with that distinctive sound of pennies and nickels, and dimes collected one at a time. Julian froze. Everything froze. The Christmas music seemed to fade into white noise. The glittering lights blurred. He became aware of the shoppers nearby stopping mid-step, turning to look, sensing that something extraordinary was happening in the middle of this ordinary mall. The child continued, oblivious to the attention, her words tumbling out with devastating innocence. "I have $47.32. I counted it 3 times to make sure. Is that enough? Because Christmas is in 2 days and I really, really need one. A daddy, I mean. I really need a daddy." Her voice cracked on the last word, and Julian felt something crack inside his own chest. This child, this small, brave child with duct tape on her shoe and hope in her piggy bank, was asking him if $47 could buy what she needed most in the world. The absurdity of it, the tragedy of it, the pure heartbreak of it hit Julian like a physical blow. His heart was hammering. His throat was closing up. Blood rushed in his ears. Images flashed through his mind unbidden, his own son's face, blank and unreachable, staring at nothing for hours. Ethan, who used to laugh at everything, now moved through their mansion like a ghost. Ethan, who hadn't asked Julian for anything in months because he'd learned his father didn't know how to give him what he actually needed. And here was this little girl, asking a stranger to sell her a father because she was desperate enough to believe it might be possible. Before Julian could respond, before he could process what was happening, a woman rushed over, frantic and horrified. "Oh my God! Sophie, you can't just—" She grabbed the little girl's arm, her face flushed with embarrassment. She looked up at Julian with mortified eyes. "I'm so sorry, sir. She didn't mean to bother you. We'll just—" The woman was young, maybe late 20s, wearing a nurse's uniform visible under a thin jacket that wasn't nearly warm enough for December weather. Her hands trembled as she tried to pull Sophie away. Julian could see the exhaustion etched into her face, the dark circles under her eyes, the way her shoulders curved inward like she'd been carrying too much weight for too long. This was Sophie's mother, and she was terrified, not of Julian, but of this moment, of her daughter's need being exposed so publicly, of asking for help even accidentally. Julian did something that shocked everyone watching. He did something that surprised even himself. He knelt down, right there in the middle of the Harrington Center luxury toy department, his $3,000 suit touching the mall floor that probably hadn't been cleaned in days. He lowered himself until he was at Sophie's eye level, until he could look directly into those red-rimmed, hopeful, heartbroken eyes. His voice, when he spoke, cracked with emotion he hadn't allowed himself to feel in 18 months. "What's your name, sweetheart?" The little girl whispered it. "Sophie." Her voice was so small. Julian nodded, swallowing hard against the lump in his throat. Then he said something that made the nearby shopper's eyes well up, made phones come out to record this moment, made the universe seem to pause and hold its breath. "Sophie, I need to know something really important. Why do you need a daddy so badly? Tell me everything." The permission in those words, the genuine invitation to be heard, to be seen, to matter, broke something open in that little girl. Sophie took a shaky breath, tears starting to roll down her cheeks, and she began. "Because Mommy cries every night and—" Pause right here. If you've ever lost someone who felt irreplaceable, if you've ever seen a child carrying pain too heavy for their small shoulders, you understand what's happening in this moment. Hit that subscribe button for Olivia the Storyteller right now, because some stories need to be heard, and if you're someone who believes broken people can find each other and heal together, you belong here. Now let's find out what Sophie told this billionaire that changed everything. But first, comment below. Have you ever witnessed a stranger's kindness that restored your faith in humanity? I'll read every single one. Sophie wasn't always the little girl asking strangers to sell her a father. 2 years ago, when she was 4 years old, Sophie Brennan knew exactly what it felt like to be loved completely. There's a memory that Linda holds onto like a lifeline, a day at the county fair in late September when the air smelled like fried dough and autumn leaves. Marcus had hoisted Sophie onto his shoulders, her small legs dangling on either side of his neck, and she squealed with delight as he bounced through the crowds. Cotton candy stuck to her fingers, bright pink and impossibly sweet, and she'd leaned down to smear some in her father's dark hair, laughing when he pretended to be outraged. Marcus Brennan had this laugh that came from deep in his chest, the kind that made everyone around him smile without knowing why. He called Sophie my little sunshine, and meant it with every fiber of his being. Linda trailed behind them with her phone out, snapping pictures she'd look at later and think how lucky they were, how impossibly lucky. Marcus worked construction, his hands calloused and rough from handling steel beams and concrete, but those same hands could braid Sophie's hair with surprising gentleness. Linda worked night shifts as an ER nurse, coming home exhausted but fulfilled. They lived paycheck to paycheck, but they had just enough. More importantly, they had each other, and that felt like everything. Their apartment was small, a 2-bedroom in a building where the heat was unreliable and the neighbors were loud, but Sophie's bedroom walls told a different story. Every available surface was covered in crayon drawings of her family as stick figures holding hands. Blue sky, yellow sun, 3 people connected. Marcus had a ritual that he never missed, no matter how tired he was from his shift. Every single night, he'd sit on the edge of Sophie's bed and read her a story, his deep voice bringing every character to life with different accents and dramatic pauses. Sophie's favorite book, the one she requested most often, was The Velveteen Rabbit. She'd snuggle against her father's side, her small finger tracing the illustrations while Marcus read about the stuffed rabbit who wanted desperately to become real and could only do so through being truly loved. "Real isn't how you are made," Marcus would read, his voice soft. "It's a thing that happens to you." Sophie didn't understand all the words, but she understood love. She could feel it in every moment, in the way her father's arm wrapped around her shoulders, in the way her mother kissed her forehead before leaving for the hospital, in the safety of knowing she belonged to people who would never let her go. March 15th arrived like any other Tuesday morning. Marcus kissed Linda goodbye as she stumbled into the apartment after her overnight shift at the hospital, her scrubs wrinkled and her feet aching. Sophie was still asleep, curled up with her stuffed rabbit, the real one Marcus had won for her at that county fair. Linda's last words to her husband were casual, thoughtless in the way that last words so often are. "Be safe out there." Marcus grinned, grabbing his hard hat and lunch pail. "Always am, babe. Love you both." The door closed behind him. Linda crawled into bed, exhausted, and slept through the morning. 8 hours later, she was back at the hospital for a quick consultation with her supervisor when her phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. She almost didn't answer. When she did, the world ended. A foreman's voice, shaking, trying to be professional but failing. Scaffolding collapse. 14-story fall. Marcus Brennan. Her Marcus. The words didn't suffer long, were meant to be a comfort, but they just meant that Linda never got to say goodbye, never got to tell him one more time that he was everything, never got to prepare for a life where "always am, babe" turned out to be a promise he couldn't keep. The aftermath was brutal in ways that grief manuals don't prepare you for. The funeral costs wiped out their tiny savings account completely. Workers' compensation battles dragged on for months. Lawyers talking about liability and negligence, while Linda just wanted her husband back. She picked up double shifts to keep their apartment, working herself into a walking ghost. Sophie was confused at first, asking when Daddy was coming home, then devastated when she understood he never would, then eerily quiet in a way that terrified Linda more than the crying had. The nightmare started. Sophie would wake up screaming, and Linda would hold her daughter while her own tears soaked into Sophie's hair. The questions evolved, got harder. Why did Daddy leave us? How do you explain to a 4-year-old that death isn't abandonment? That her father would give anything to be there? Linda tried to answer while breaking down silently in the shower later, the water hiding her sobs, so Sophie wouldn't hear her mother falling apart too. The present became a daily exercise in survival that looked nothing like living. Creditors called at all hours about bills Linda couldn't pay. Sophie wore clothes from donation bins, hand-me-downs that never quite fit. Linda's hands shook from exhaustion and malnutrition as she made Sophie's birthday breakfast last year, sugar sandwiches, because it was all they had in the apartment. White bread with butter and sugar sprinkled on top, something Linda's own mother used to make when money was tight. Sophie ate them without complaint, and that somehow made it worse. Last month, Sophie's kindergarten teacher had pulled Linda aside after pickup, her expression carefully neutral in that way teachers have when they're about to break your heart. She drew a picture today in art class. "Would you like to see it?" Linda took the paper with trembling hands. There was Sophie, rendered in black crayon, standing alone on a blank page. And where her father used to be in all those stick figure drawings on her bedroom wall, there was just a dark scribble, heavy and angry, the crayon pressed so hard it had torn through the paper in places. Linda's heart shattered all over again, because she understood. Sophie was trying to erase the pain by scribbling out the memory, but the hole just got bigger. If you're feeling this, I need you to do something for me. Subscribe to Olivia the Storyteller right now, because tomorrow I'm sharing another story about survival that will wreck you in the best way. And if you don't subscribe, at least comment below telling me, what's the hardest goodbye you've ever had to say? Sometimes we need to share these stories. Sometimes being witnessed in our pain is the only medicine that works. While Sophie and Linda were learning to survive in a world without Marcus, Julian Ashford was discovering that you can have everything and still be completely empty. His penthouse overlooked the entire city, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view that real estate agents called priceless. His net worth sat at $2.7 billion, give or take whatever the stock market did that day. He built a technology empire from scratch, the kind of success story that business schools taught as case studies. From the outside, Julian Ashford's life looked like the American dream realized. From the inside, it was a haunted house with expensive furniture. On a Tuesday afternoon 6 months before he met Sophie, Julian stood at those floor-to-ceiling windows, looking at nothing, a glass of whiskey in his hand. It was 2 in the afternoon. He couldn't remember the last time he'd felt sober, couldn't remember the last time he'd felt anything at all except the crushing weight of his own failure. Because none of it mattered. Not the penthouse, not the billions, not the empire. His wife was dead, and his son wouldn't speak to him, and Julian would trade every dollar, every achievement, every accolade to have one more ordinary Tuesday with the people who made him feel human. 18 months ago, Grace Ashford was alive. She was brilliant and warm, and the only person who'd ever seen through Julian's armor to the scared kid underneath who was terrified of being abandoned. They'd met in college when Julian had nothing, and she'd loved him then just as fiercely as she loved him when the billions started rolling in. Grace was his anchor, his compass, the person who made sure their family had a heartbeat and not just a bank account. Brain aneurysm. The doctors said it was sudden, said it was merciful in its speed, said there was nothing anyone could have done. But sudden meant Grace collapsed at Ethan's school during pickup, surrounded by other parents and screaming children. Sudden meant she was gone before the ambulance arrived, before anyone who loved her could hold her hand. And Julian wasn't there. He was in a board meeting downtown. Phone silence because the Tokyo investors were on the line, and this deal was too important to interrupt. By the time someone reached him, by the time he broke every traffic law getting to the hospital, Grace's body was already cold. He missed her last moments because he was negotiating profit margins. That knowledge eats at him daily like acid poured directly on his soul, burning away everything except the certainty that he failed the only person who ever really mattered. What happened to Ethan after that was somehow worse than Julian's own grief. His son had been bright and talkative, one of those kids who asked 1,000 questions and actually listened to the answers. Ethan played soccer and loved dinosaurs, and had this habit of narrating his own life like a nature documentary that made Grace laugh until she cried. After she died, Ethan stopped. Just stopped. He stopped playing with toys, stopped asking questions, stopped narrating. He'd sit for hours with his tablet, staring at the screen but not really watching anything, just existing in whatever gray space grief had carved out inside him. Julian hired the best child therapists money could buy, but none of them could break through. Julian didn't know how to reach his own son. Every attempt felt awkward and forced, his words landing wrong, his gestures too stiff. He could negotiate billion-dollar deals with hostile boards, could read a room, and know exactly what people needed to hear, but he couldn't make his 8-year-old boy smile. The irony was devastating. Julian's guilt became a spiral he couldn't escape. He tallied up his failures with the precision he usually reserved for quarterly reports. Missed soccer games because of conference calls to Singapore. Forgotten recitals because some crisis at the company demanded his attention. Bedtime stories he'd skip because he was too tired, too stressed, too important. Grace had carried their entire emotional life on her shoulders, had been mother and father and heart of their family while Julian built his empire. He told himself he was providing for them, securing their future, but the truth was simpler and more shameful. He'd hidden in his work because it was easier than being present, easier than being vulnerable, easier than admitting he didn't know how to be the kind of father his son deserved. Now Grace was gone and Julian was drowning, and he had no idea how to swim in emotional waters this deep. He tried to fill the void with material things, the only language he spoke fluently. Expensive summer camps, private tutors for subjects Ethan didn't care about, rooms full of unopened toys, each one a monument to Julian's inadequacy. Ethan remained unreachable, and Julian became more desperate, more lost. His own father had been cold and absent, a man who believed affection was weakness and emotional distance was strength. Julian had sworn he'd be different, had promised himself he'd never make his child feel invisible. But grief turned him into exactly what he'd feared becoming. Christmas was approaching when Julian's assistant made a suggestion with the careful tone of someone speaking to a volatile CEO. Maybe take Ethan to the mall? Pick out a gift together, something personal. So Julian dragged his silent son to Harrington Center, hoping that maybe, somehow, shopping would create a connection words couldn't. Ethan wandered off to look at something, and Julian stood alone in the toy department, surrounded by options he couldn't decode, realizing with crushing clarity that he didn't know what his son liked anymore. Didn't know his favorite color, or his current interests, or what made him happy. He felt like the world's richest failure, a man who could buy anything except the ability to be a decent father. That's when he felt it. A small hand tugging on his coat sleeve. Money can't buy connection. Success can't purchase healing. Julian had everything except what mattered most, and he was about to discover that sometimes the people who save us are the ones we least expect. If you're someone who understands that being rich and being whole are two completely different things, subscribe to Olivia the Storyteller. And if you won't subscribe, at least tell me in the comments, what's something money can't fix in your life? Let's be real with each other. 3 weeks before that moment in the mall, Sophie Brennan made a decision that would change our lives forever. It happened on a night when Linda thought her daughter was asleep. Sophie had gotten up to use the bathroom and heard her mother's voice coming from the kitchen, talking on the phone with Aunt Rachel. Linda's voice was breaking, words tumbling out between sobs. "I don't know how to be both parents, Rachel. She asks for him every single day. She asked me yesterday if Daddy didn't love us enough to stay, and I didn't know what to say. I'm failing her. I'm failing at everything." Sophie stood frozen in the hallway, hidden around the corner, her small heart absorbing every word like a sponge, soaking up water. Her mother was sad because Sophie needed a daddy. Her mother was crying because they didn't have enough. And in that moment, with the logic that only a 6-year-old possesses, Sophie made a plan. If Mommy couldn't buy a new daddy, if Mommy was too tired and too sad to fix this problem, then Sophie would do it herself. She'd save up her money, find someone who was selling daddies, and buy one. Then Mommy would stop crying. The determination that settled into Sophie's bones that night was heartbreaking in its innocence and absolute in its conviction. The next morning, Sophie started her secret saving plan. Every penny she found on the sidewalk went into her piggy bank. Every quarter that had fallen between couch cushions. She checked the ground near vending machines at the laundromat where Linda did their washing. When Linda's sister visited the following week, Sophie cornered her aunt with a question that made Rachel's blood run cold. "Aunt Rachel, how much does a person cost?" Rachel had laughed nervously, confused. "Sweetie, people aren't for sale. Where did you get that idea?" Sophie nodded seriously but didn't explain, filing away the information. If people weren't for sale in stores, she'd have to find another way. A few days later, Sophie asked her kindergarten teacher during free playtime, her voice earnest and small. "Miss Jennifer, how much would it cost to make someone stop being sad forever?" Her teacher, concerned but not understanding the full picture, had knelt down and said gently, "Sadness isn't something we can buy our way out of, sweetheart. But love helps. Love and time." Sophie absorbed this too, but she remained unconvinced. There had to be a price. Everything had a price. Sophie's research consisted of watching television with new intensity. The commercials showed happy families with fathers who came home from work and hugged their children. These families had nice cars and big houses. They went on vacations and ate dinner together at tables that weren't scratched and wobbling. Sophie drew a conclusion that made perfect sense to her young mind. Rich people have everything, including daddies. Poor people like her and Mommy didn't have daddies because they couldn't afford them. So she needed to save enough money and find a rich person who could help her. She decorated her piggy bank with flower stickers, carefully placing each one to make it look professional and important. Every night before bed, she counted her savings. $47.32. It had taken weeks of searching and saving, and surely that was enough to buy at least a used daddy, someone who maybe needed a new family as much as she and Mommy needed him. December 23rd arrived cold and gray. Linda had finally gotten a day off from the hospital, but the bills sitting on their counter were bright red with words like "final notice" and "account past due." When the hospital called offering her an extra shift, Linda's exhausted heart made the calculation it always made: Sophie's needs versus their survival. She said yes. Linda's sister Rachel had offered to watch Sophie, but 20 minutes later Rachel called back, frantic, her own work emergency pulling her away. Linda stood in their tiny apartment, running on 3 hours of sleep, and made a choice she would agonize over later. She'd take Sophie to the mall, keep her close, quickly grab one modest gift to put under their small tree. Something that cost less than $20. Something that would make Christmas feel like Christmas instead of just another day of barely surviving. Inside Harrington Center, Sophie's eyes went wide. She'd never been anywhere this fancy. The Christmas decorations sparkled like something from a dream. Women in designer coats that probably cost more than Linda made in a month glided past. Men in expensive suits talked on phones about deals and meetings. This was where rich people came. This was where Sophie would find help. Linda clutched Sophie's hand tightly, navigating toward the clearance section with the determination of someone who knows exactly how many dollars are in her wallet and what she can't afford to exceed. But then Sophie saw him. A tall man in a suit that looked like it was made of smoke and money, standing alone in the toy department. He looked important, but more than that, he looked sad. Sophie recognized that sadness because she saw it every day in her mother's eyes, reflected back in the bathroom mirror. She thought something that made perfect, terrible sense to her. Rich people get sad too, so maybe he understands what sad feels like. Maybe he'll want to help. While Linda was distracted by a price tag, calculating whether she could afford a $22 toy if she skipped lunch for the next week, Sophie slipped her small hand from her mother's grip. She picked up her carefully decorated piggy bank. She walked across the toy department to Julian Ashford, gathering every ounce of courage her 6-year-old heart possessed, and asked the question that would shatter everything. That moment, when desperation meets innocence, is when miracles become possible. But they also become dangerous. What happens next tests everything these characters believe about themselves. Subscribe to Olivia the Storyteller right now if you want to see where this impossible moment leads. And for those of you who refuse to subscribe, I genuinely want to know why not. Como bilo? Are you afraid of commitment? Do you hate emotional stories? Are you just hate watching? I'm genuinely curious because this community is everything to me. We're back in that moment where time stopped, where Julian Ashford is kneeling on the mall floor in his $3,000 suit, and Sophie Brennan is crying, trying to explain why she needs to buy a father. Linda is pulling at Sophie's arm, mortified beyond words, her face flushed with shame and panic. Sophie, we need to go right now. This gentleman doesn't want to hear about our problems. We're bothering him. But Julian holds up one hand, and the authority in that simple gesture stops Linda mid-sentence. Please, he says, his voice carrying that particular power that comes from years of commanding boardrooms, but softened by something raw and genuine. I want to hear this. Linda freezes, caught between maternal protection and the desperate exhaustion of someone who's been drowning for 2 years. Around them, a small crowd has started to gather because people sense when something real is happening, when the normal script of mall shopping is being torn up and replaced with something that matters. Phones come out. Strangers pause their holiday rush to watch this bizarre Christmas scene unfold, this wealthy man kneeling before a poor child who thinks fathers can be purchased. Sophie takes a shuddering breath, and the words pour out between gasps and tears, her small voice breaking on every other syllable. Mommy works all the time and she's so tired. She works at the hospital, and sometimes she works 2 shifts and she comes home, and her hands shake when she makes my dinner. And she cries when she thinks I'm sleeping, but I hear her. I hear her crying in the shower and in her bedroom and sometimes in the car. And I used to have a daddy, but he died, and I miss him so much it hurts in my chest. And I thought maybe if I bought a new daddy, even a used one would be okay. I'm not picky. Then Mommy wouldn't cry anymore and maybe we could be happy again. And I saved all my money, every single penny I found, and I counted it so many times. Her hands are shaking as she tries to open her piggy bank, fingers slipping on the plastic plug on the bottom. When it finally comes loose, coins spill onto the mall floor, pennies and nickels and dimes and quarters scattering across the polished tile, bouncing and rolling. $47.32 worth of hope spread out like shattered dreams. Is it enough? Sophie whispers, looking up at Julian with eyes that are simultaneously ancient and impossibly young. Is it enough to buy someone who could love us? Julian's face goes through emotions like a storm system moving across a landscape. Linda sees it happen because grief recognizes grief the way soldiers recognize others who've seen combat. His jaw clenches. His eyes shine with unshed tears. His hands curl into fists and then release. When he finally speaks, his voice is thick with emotion he's been holding back for 18 months. Sophie, I can't be bought. Nobody can. People aren't for sale, sweetheart. Sophie's face starts to crumble, devastation replacing hope, but Julian continues quickly. But I want you to know something really important. He starts picking up her scattered coins, placing them carefully back in her piggy bank with the tenderness of someone handling something precious. The love you have for your mom? That's the most valuable thing in the world. All the money I have, and I have a lot, doesn't equal what you just showed me. That kind of love can't be bought or sold. It just is. Sophie's lip trembles. But she needs help and I don't know how to help her. I'm just a kid. I can't make enough money. I can't make the sad go away. That's when Ethan appears. Julian's assistant had been hovering nearby, phone in hand, ready to extract her boss from this awkward situation, and Ethan had wandered over, drawn by the commotion. He stares at Sophie with an intensity Julian hasn't seen on his son's face in months. It's the first time since Grace died that Ethan has shown interest in anything beyond his tablet screen. Ethan speaks, and Julian nearly falls over because these are his son's first voluntary words in days. Dad? Why is she crying? Such a simple question, but it cracks something open in Julian's chest. He looks at his son, really looks at him, and sees a boy who's been drowning in the same way this little girl is drowning, in the same way her mother is drowning. Then he looks at Sophie with her piggy bank and her duct tape shoe. Then at Linda, this exhausted nurse whose uniform is threadbare and whose eyes hold the kind of bone-deep tiredness that comes from carrying impossible weight alone. And something fundamental shifts in Julian's chest. A wild, impossible, completely insane idea forms in his mind. It's reckless. It's unprecedented. But it's also the first thing that's felt right since Grace died. Julian stands, brushing off his knees, and addresses Linda directly with the same focus he brings to billion-dollar negotiations. Miss Brennan, it is Brennan, right? Linda nods, completely confused, her hand still gripping Sophie's shoulder like a lifeline. Julian continues, and everyone in that crowd leans in to hear. I know this is going to sound absolutely insane, but I need you to hear me out completely before you say no. What if I told you I have a proposal that could help both our families? Not buying or selling anything, because Sophie's right that people can't be purchased. But something that might give all four of us what we desperately need right now. Linda stares at this billionaire, this stranger who's kneeling on mall floors and picking up pennies and looking at her daughter like she matters. Every instinct screams this is dangerous, but Linda's been desperate for so long that she's forgotten what safe feels like. Her voice comes out suspicious and small. What kind of proposal? Wait, what? What is he about to suggest? If you're sitting there thinking there's no way this is going real, trust me, what comes next will shock you. Subscribe to Olivia the Storyteller because we post stories like this 3 times a week, and you don't want to miss what happens when desperation and possibility collide. Comment below if you think you know what Julian's about to propose. I bet most of you are wrong. Julian gestures toward the coffee shop tucked into the corner of the mall, the kind of place where overpriced lattes come with names that require 3 syllables. Can we talk privately? Please. Just 5 minutes of your time. Linda looks at Sophie, then at the strange billionaire with his expensive suit and his sad eyes, calculating risks the way mothers do when everything feels dangerous. Something in his expression looks broken in a familiar way, like he's holding himself together with wire and willpower. Against every reasonable instinct, she nods. They walk to the coffee shop, Sophie's small hand in Linda's, Ethan following close to his father. They sit at a corner table. Julian orders hot chocolate for the kids without asking, the kind with whipped cream and chocolate shavings that costs $8 a cup. Coffee for the adults. When the drinks arrive, Julian wraps his hands around his cup like he needs something to hold on to and begins the most impossible pitch of his life. My son needs connection, Julian starts, his voice low enough that nearby shoppers can't hear. Your daughter needs stability. You need support. He stops, swallows hard, and Linda watches his throat work against emotion. I need to remember how to be a father, how to feel human again instead of just going through motions. Here's what I'm proposing, and I need you to hear the whole thing before you react. Live in my guest house. It's separate from the main residence, completely private, your own space. 6-month arrangement to start. No strings attached. I'll cover all your expenses during that time, help you get back on your feet financially, pay off whatever debts are drowning you. In exchange, Sophie and Ethan can be friends. You and I can figure out this co-parenting thing together, not romantically. I'm not suggesting that at all, just functionally. Like a support system. 2 single parents helping each other survive. He looks directly at Linda. I have resources I don't know how to use to help my son. You have something I can't buy, this warmth and love and ability to connect that my son desperately needs. This isn't charity. It's mutual aid. Linda's immediate reaction is exactly what you'd expect from a woman who's been struggling alone for 2 years. Incredulity mixed with deep suspicion, her eyes narrowing as she processes what the stranger just suggested. Are you out of your mind? You want me to move my daughter into your house? I don't know you. I don't know anything about you except that you're rich, and you're sad, and you're kneeling on mall floors. Why would I move my 6-year-old into a stranger's home? This sounds like the setup for a Dateline episode where they find our bodies in a guest house, and everyone asks why the single mom was so stupid. Julian nods, and there's no defensiveness in the gesture, just acknowledgement. You're absolutely right to be suspicious. Every protective instinct you have should be screaming at you right now. But look at your daughter. Really look at her. Both of them turn to watch Sophie, who's showing Ethan her piggy bank stickers, explaining each flower with the seriousness of a museum curator. And look at my son. Ethan is listening, actually listening, his face showing something close to interest for the first time in months. They're both drowning, Linda. Can I call you Linda? We're both drowning too. I have resources I'm not using effectively. You have this incredible capacity for love and warmth that my son needs like oxygen. This isn't charity. It's not me rescuing you. It's all 4 of us maybe rescuing each other. Linda's mind is a battlefield, pride warring with desperation, dignity fighting against reality. The truth is she's 3 months behind on rent, and the eviction notice came last week, shoved under her apartment door like a death sentence. The truth is Sophie needs dental work that Linda can't afford, cavities that keep her daughter up at night. The truth is Linda is 1 missed shift away from homelessness, 1 emergency away from complete collapse. But accepting help from a wealthy stranger, moving into his property, becoming dependent on his resources? Every instinct screams danger. Every news story she's ever heard about vulnerable women making bad choices echoes in her head. Yet Julian's grief seems genuine, not performed. And Sophie is already talking to Ethan like they've been friends forever, her daughter's face showing a lightness Linda hasn't seen in months. Ethan is almost smiling, the corners of his mouth turning up tentatively like he's forgotten how, but his body remembers. That's when a voice cuts through the moment like a knife through silk. Julian? What on earth are you doing? A woman appears beside their table, designer shopping bags from stores Linda couldn't afford to breathe near dangling from her manicured hands. Patricia Vanderbilt, though Linda doesn't know her name yet, only knows the type. The woman's gaze sweeps over Linda's worn nurse uniform, the thin jacket, the exhaustion written into every line of her face, and Linda watches distaste flicker across those perfectly made-up features. Patricia's voice drops to a hiss, but Linda can still hear every word. This is absurd. Gold digger alert. Julian, you're vulnerable right now, and she's clearly taking advantage. Grace's parents will lose their minds when they hear about this. Your board will question your judgment. This looks terrible. Julian's face, which had been open and almost hopeful, hardens into something Linda recognizes from business news profiles. The billionaire CEO, cold and immovable. Patricia, he says, his voice carrying an edge sharp enough to cut glass. With all due respect, this is none of your concern. And if you ever speak about Linda or her daughter that way again, we'll have a very different conversation about your position in my company. Class warfare is real, and it's about to get brutal. Patricia represents everyone who's ever looked at struggling people and assumed the worst, who's ever equated poverty with moral failure, who's ever believed that needing help makes you a predator. If you've ever been judged for your circumstances, if you've ever had someone imply you're not good enough because of your bank account, if you've ever felt the sting of being dismissed as less than human because of the number in your wallet, you know exactly what Linda's feeling right now. Subscribe to Olivia the Storyteller if you want to see whether Julian stands firm or crumbles under social pressure. And if you're still not subscribing, comment and tell me, am I asking too much? What would make you finally hit that button? Seriously, I want to know. Linda asks for 24 hours to think about Julian's impossible proposal. She needs time to process, to weigh the risks against the desperation that's been her constant companion for 2 years. Julian agrees immediately, pulling a business card from his wallet and pressing it into her hand. Whatever you decide, please keep this. Call if you or Sophie need anything, and I mean anything. Medical bills, groceries, rent, whatever. I mean that. Linda takes the card, feeling the expensive weight of the cardstock between her fingers, and leaves the mall in a daze. That night, lying in their cramped apartment with its water-stained ceiling and the sirens from the street below, Linda listens to Sophie sleep-talking. Her daughter's small voice murmurs about wanting to make friends with the sad boy and asking if they can help him smile again. Linda stares at the eviction notice on her nightstand, at the stack of medical bills she can't pay, at the reality of their situation. She thinks about pride and safety, and what kind of mother lets fear prevent her from giving her child a chance at stability. At 2 a.m, hands shaking, Linda picks up her phone and calls the number on Julian's card. He answers on the second ring, voice alert like he wasn't sleeping either. Linda's voice comes out stronger than she feels. Okay, I'll do it, but I have conditions. Linda's conditions are non-negotiable, and she delivers them like someone who spent her whole life learning to protect herself. Separate living spaces with locks she controls. Clear boundaries about personal space and privacy. She continues working part-time at the hospital because pride demands she maintain some independence, some proof that she's not just being kept like a pet. A written agreement spelling out exactly what this arrangement is and isn't. The ability to leave at any time if things feel unsafe or wrong. No questions asked, with enough financial support to get back on her feet. No media, no publicity, no making her and Sophie into some feel-good story for the news. And absolute clarity that this is temporary, 6 months to start, with both parties able to walk away. Julian agrees to everything without hesitation. His lawyer drafts paperwork that night, documents that protect Linda in ways she didn't even know to ask for. 3 days later, on December 26th, with their few belongings packed into garbage bags because they don't own suitcases, Linda and Sophie move into the guest house on Julian Ashford's property. The culture shock hits Linda like a physical blow. The guest house alone is bigger than any place she's ever lived. 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a full kitchen with appliances that look like they belong in a spaceship, living room with furniture that's never been sat on. Sophie's new room has its own bathroom with a tub big enough to swim in. Linda stands in the shower of her own bathroom, hot water pouring over her for as long as she wants without worrying about the gas bill, and she cries. Relief and fear and gratitude and shame all mixed together, tears mixing with water, her body shaking with sobs she's been holding back for months. She's terrified she's made a terrible mistake. She's terrified this is too good to be true. She's terrified of needing this too much. Meanwhile, Sophie is tentatively exploring their new space, touching everything like it might disappear, when there's a knock on their front door. Linda emerges from the bathroom, eyes red, to find Ethan standing there holding a toy robot. He looks at Sophie with shy uncertainty and holds out the toy. "Wanna play?" Sophie's face transforms, breaking into a beam of pure joy. It's the first genuine smile Linda has seen on her daughter's face in weeks, maybe months, and it makes every terrifying choice worth it. Evening arrives and Julian invites them to dinner in the main house. The walk across the property feels surreal, like crossing into another dimension. Inside, the main house is exactly what you'd expect from a billionaire. All clean lines and expensive art and spaces too big for the people living in them. Dinner is awkward at first. Linda and Julian both hyper-aware of the class differences between them, both trying too hard to make conversation, both failing. Linda uses the wrong fork. Julian apologizes for having too many forks. The tension is thick enough to cut. But then Sophie, bless her fearless heart, asks Ethan about his robot collection, and suddenly the kids are talking rapid-fire, interrupting each other, showing off their favorite toys and explaining elaborate games. Ethan's face lights up in a way Julian hasn't seen since before Grace died. He's animated, laughing, making explosion sounds as he demonstrates how his robots battle. Julian watches his son with tears gathering in his eyes. Linda sees those tears and feels her own throat tighten. Their gazes meet across the dinner table, and something passes between them, an unspoken understanding that needs no words. We're both terrified. We're both desperate. We're both taking a massive leap of faith. And maybe, just maybe, this insane idea might actually work. That night, Linda tucks Sophie into her new bed with its cloud-soft mattress and sheets that probably cost more than Linda made in a month. Sophie looks up at her mother with worried eyes and whispers a question that breaks Linda's heart. "Mommy, am I allowed to like it here? Is that okay? I still miss Daddy so much. Does liking this place mean I'm forgetting him?" Linda's throat closes up completely. She has to swallow 3 times before she can speak. "Baby, listen to me. You can like it here and miss Daddy. Both things can be true at the same time. Love doesn't run out. Your heart is big enough for all of it. Daddy would want you to be happy. He'd want you to have a safe place to sleep and friends to play with. Liking good things doesn't mean you've forgotten the people we've lost." Sophie nods, clutching her piggy bank like a talisman, and closes her eyes. Across the property in the main house, Ethan is asking Julian his own question, his voice small in the darkness of his bedroom. "Dad, can Sophie be my friend? Like a real friend? Can she stay?" Julian sits on the edge of his son's bed and pulls him into a hug, the first real hug they've shared in months, and feels his son's small arms wrap around him in return. "Yeah, buddy, I think she can." 2 broken families starting to find pieces of each other. But healing isn't linear, and the outside world is about to make everything so much harder. Subscribe to Olivia the Storyteller because what comes next is going to test everyone's resolve in ways they can't imagine. And seriously, for those of you still not subscribing, at this point I'm not even mad. I'm impressed by your commitment to lurking. Comment below, what's your excuse? I'm building a list. 3 weeks into their new arrangement, someone leaked the story. Patricia Vanderbilt, most likely, though no one could prove it. The headlines exploded across tabloids and social media like bombs detonating in sequence. Billionaire, suspicious new, living arrangement raises eyebrows. Gold digger mom moves into grieving widower's home. Is Julian Ashford being taken advantage of? The paparazzi showed up within hours, camping outside the gates with telephoto lenses, trying to catch photos of Linda and Sophie through the wrought iron. Linda's colleagues at the hospital started whispering when she walked past, conversation stopping mid-sentence, eyes following her with judgment and speculation. The hospital administrator called her into his office, his expression carefully neutral, asking if she wanted to take a leave of absence because of concerns about optics and whether her personal situation might reflect poorly on the hospital's reputation. Linda heard what he didn't say. "We're worried you're exactly what the headlines claim, and we don't want that association." The social media brutality was worse than anything Linda could have imagined. Complete strangers dissected every choice she'd ever made, weaponizing her grief and poverty into evidence of moral failure. Someone found her old Facebook photos and spread them across Twitter, analyzing her expressions for signs of calculation, turning innocent family pictures into proof of gold-digging intent. The comments were vicious and creative in their cruelty. People accused her of using Sophie to trap a billionaire, of exploiting her daughter's genuine grief as a manipulation tactic. Conspiracy theories bloomed like poisonous flowers. Maybe Marcus's death wasn't an accident. Maybe Linda had planned this all along. Maybe she'd been stalking Julian for months, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The tweets were the worst, their brevity making them hit harder. She's probably thrilled her husband died, so she could upgrade. That poor man lost his wife, and now this parasite is moving in. Those kids are being used as pawns in a sick game. Linda read every single word, unable to stop herself, each comment a knife sliding between her ribs. She stopped sleeping, lying awake at 3 a.m, scrolling through hatred from people who'd never met her. She stopped eating because her stomach stayed clenched in knots. She started having panic attacks in the guest house bathroom, gasping for air while Sophie slept in the next room. Then Grace's parents arrived unannounced, their luxury sedan pulling through the gates like an invading army. Eleanor and Robert Morrison were everything Linda expected from old money, wealthy, grieving, and absolutely furious that their daughter's home had been invaded by someone they considered beneath them. They demanded to see Ethan immediately, and when Julian reluctantly allowed it, Eleanor's venom found its target in Linda. "How dare you invade our daughter's home? How dare you insert yourself and your child into our grandson's life like you have any right to be here? Ethan doesn't need a replacement mother or a new sister. He needs to remember Grace, to honor her memory, not replace her with some opportunistic nurse who saw a meal ticket." Robert's threats were more direct and terrifying. We'll fight for custody if you don't remove these people from the premises. We have lawyers who can make your life very difficult, Julian. Our daughter deserves better than this mockery of her memory. Ethan overheard everything from the hallway, pressed against the wall, listening to his grandparents talk about the only friend he'd made in months like Sophie was a disease that needed to be removed. He regressed into silence again, stopped talking, stopped engaging, his face going blank the way it had been before Sophie arrived. Linda hit her breaking point at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday. She packed their bags with shaking hands, throwing their few belongings into the same garbage bags they'd arrived with, moving on autopilot while tears streamed down her face. Sophie woke up confused and scared. "Mommy, what are you doing?" Linda's voice came out harsh with fear and shame. "We're leaving, baby. We never should have come here. This was a mistake." Sophie started crying, her small voice breaking. "But Ethan needs us. And we need them. We're happy here. Mommy, please." Linda was breaking apart, every word feeling like it was being ripped from her chest. "Baby, the world doesn't work like that. People like us don't get to be in places like this. We don't belong here. I was stupid to think we did." She grabbed their bags and headed for the door, but Julian was suddenly there, blocking their exit. He must have seen the lights, must have known this was coming. "Linda, please. Don't do this. Don't let them win. Don't let fear decide this." The confrontation they'd been avoiding for weeks finally erupted. Linda unleashed everything, weeks of accumulated stress and shame pouring out in a flood of words. "You have no idea what it's like. Everyone thinks I'm using you. Everyone thinks I'm a gold digger who's exploiting my daughter to trap a rich man. My own colleagues look at me like I'm a prostitute. Your in-laws want me destroyed, and they have the money and power to do it. The entire internet thinks I killed my husband for insurance money, so I could hunt for a billionaire. This arrangement is hurting everyone. It's hurting you, it's hurting Ethan, it's definitely hurting me and Sophie. I can't do this anymore." Julian's response was fierce, his voice carrying an intensity Linda had only heard in boardrooms. "I don't care what anyone thinks. Do you hear me? I don't care about Patricia, or the internet, or even Grace's parents. For the first time in 18 months, my son is healing. He's talking again. He's playing. He has a friend. Sophie is healing too. Look at her, Linda. Really look at her. She's not that terrified little girl from the mall anymore. You're healing whether you admit it or not. And maybe," his voice cracked, vulnerability breaking through, "maybe I'm healing too." Linda stared at him, bags heavy in her hands, Sophie crying behind her, and then Ethan appeared in the doorway looking absolutely devastated, his small face crumpling as he realized what was happening. Linda had to make a choice right there in that doorway. Safety or courage, running or fighting, protecting herself from judgment or protecting the fragile, beautiful thing they'd started to build together. This is the moment, the make or break point. When the whole world is telling you to give up, when everyone's saying you don't deserve good things, when staying requires more courage than leaving, what do? Subscribe to Olivia the Storyteller if you want to see what Linda decides. And if you still aren't subscribing, I'm legitimately baffled but also kind of respect your stubbornness. Comment below. Are you team stay and fight or team protect yourself and leave? The silence stretches out between them, tension pulled so tight it could snap. Linda's hands shake on the garbage bags. Julian's face is pleading, but he won't beg, won't manipulate, just stands there offering something Linda doesn't know if she deserves. Then Sophie's small voice cuts through the moment like a bell ringing clear. "Mommy, remember what you told me? About how love doesn't run out, and how my heart's big enough for all of it." Linda's face crumples, fresh tears spilling over. Sophie isn't done. She steps forward, her 6-year-old wisdom delivered with the gravity of someone much older. "I think Ethan's heart has room too, for his mom who died, and for us who are here. And I think Julian's learning how to be a daddy again. And I think you're scared, Mommy, but that doesn't mean you should stop being brave. You told me being brave means doing the right thing even when you're scared. Isn't this the right thing? The wisdom from this child destroys everyone present." Julian's eyes fill with tears. Linda lets out a sob that's been trapped in her chest for weeks. This little girl who wanted to buy a father is now teaching the adults how to choose love over fear. Ethan moves forward then, his small feet patting across the floor. He takes Sophie's hand first, their fingers intertwining with the natural ease of children who've decided they belong to each other. Then he reaches for Linda's hand with his other one, and when his small fingers wrap around hers, Linda feels something break open in her chest. Ethan speaks his first words in days, his voice cracking with emotion. "Please don't go. You make the house feel less empty. Like there's life here again, instead of just sadness and quiet." Dad smiles now when he sees you guys in the morning. I haven't seen him smile like that since Mom died, and I forgot what it looked like. And Sophie's my best friend, and I don't want her to leave, because then I'll be alone again, and I can't be alone again, I can't. He can't finish the sentence. Starts crying those heartbreaking sobs that come from a child who's lost too much already. Julian moves instinctively to comfort his son, but Ethan does something unexpected. He pulls Linda into the embrace too, his arms reaching around both adults, and suddenly Sophie is there joining them, and they're a circle of 4 broken people holding each other together, tears mixing, hearts connecting. Linda makes her choice in that moment. She sets down the garbage bags, letting them fall to the floor with a soft thud that sounds like surrender and victory all at once. "Okay," she says, her voice steady for the first time in weeks. "We stay. But things change starting right now. No more hiding from the world. No more pretending this arrangement is something simple and explainable, because it's not, and it never will be. We tell the truth. We're a family learning to be a family. Messy and complicated and real and not fitting into anyone's neat boxes. That's what we are." Julian nods immediately. "Whatever you need. Tell me what you need." Linda looks at him with steel in her eyes. "I need you to hold a press conference. I need you to stand in front of those cameras and those judgmental reporters and tell the world exactly why we're here. I need you to tell them the truth and dare them to judge us for choosing healing over conformity. Because I'm done being ashamed. I'm done letting other people's opinions make me feel like I don't deserve good things." 2 days later, Julian's front lawn becomes a media circus. Cameras everywhere, reporters jockeying for position, news vans with satellite dishes lining the street. Julian stands at a podium with Linda beside him, their presence together a statement before words are even spoken. Sophie and Ethan stand in front of them, holding hands, these 2 children who started everything. Julian's statement is powerful and completely unapologetic, his billionaire authority channeled into defending the family they're building. 18 months ago, I lost my wife, Grace. This woman beside me, Linda Brennan, lost her husband, Marcus. Our children lost parents they loved. We found each other not through romance or manipulation or schemes, but through one child's innocent question about buying a daddy in a shopping mall. And here's what I learned from these 3 people. Family isn't about blood or money or social approval. It's about showing up. It's about choosing each other daily, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Linda Brennan is the strongest, most dignified person I know. She works herself to exhaustion for her daughter. She maintains her independence, even when accepting help. Anyone who questions her character doesn't know her story and doesn't deserve to judge it. Then it's Linda's turn, and her voice shakes at first but holds firm, growing stronger with each word. I grew up being told to know my place, to not reach above my station, to be grateful for scraps and never ask for more. But my daughter taught me something that changed everything. Sometimes asking for what you need, even when it seems impossible, is the bravest thing you can do. We're here because 2 children needed connection more than they needed the world's approval. We're here because grief doesn't follow neat timelines, and healing looks different for everyone. We're here because Julian offered help and I was desperate enough to accept it and brave enough to stay. If that makes me a gold digger in your eyes, so be it. I know my truth. I know I work hard. I know I love my daughter. I know these kids are healing each other. And I'm done apologizing for surviving. Cameras flash like lightning. Reporters shout questions that blur together. But in that moment, standing together as a unit with the children between them, they're untouchable. That's what courage looks like. Standing in your truth, even when the world is screaming at you to be smaller, quieter, more ashamed. If that moment just gave you chills, subscribe to Olivia the Storyteller right now. We share stories about people who refuse to let the world break them. And for those of you still holding out on subscribing, honestly, at this point you're basically just trolling me, and I have to admire the commitment. Comment below, would you have had the courage to do what Linda just did? July arrives warm and golden, and Sophie Brennan turns 7 years old. The birthday party happens in Julian's backyard, but it's not the elaborate celebrity kid extravaganza he could easily afford with petting zoos and celebrity appearances and gift bags worth more than most people's rent. Instead, it's something simple and perfect. A backyard barbecue with hot dogs and hamburgers smoking on the grill. Children from Sophie's new school running around playing tag. Ethan's friends from soccer finally included, these kids who'd slowly started coming around once Ethan started smiling again. Balloons tied to tree branches, bobbing in the summer breeze. Linda and Julian co-host naturally now, moving around each other with the practiced ease of people who've learned each other's rhythms. She grabs the ketchup before he asks for it. He refills her iced tea without her noticing the glass was empty. The arrangement remains technically platonic. Linda still has her guest house with locks she controls. Julian still has a space in the main house. But the boundaries have softened over 6 months into something that looks and feels like genuine family, even if it doesn't fit any traditional definition. Ethan has transformed in ways that make Julian's chest tight with gratitude every time he looks at his son. The therapy is working, the combination of professional help and having Sophie as a constant presence breaking through walls that seemed impenetrable. Ethan laughs frequently now, this bright sound that fills the house with life. He plays soccer again, his team making the playoffs last month with Ethan scoring the winning goal while Linda and Julian and Sophie screamed themselves hoarse in the stands. He still grieves his mother and always will. There are still hard days when he cries for Grace, when he looks at her photos and his face crumples with loss. But he's found room for joy alongside the grief, learned that healing doesn't mean forgetting. He and Sophie are inseparable, these two kids who saved each other calling themselves best friends and sometimes, more tentatively, like a brother and like a sister. Even Grace's parents came to the party, Eleanor and Robert Morrison arriving with rapt presents and apologetic expressions. The tension has dissolved over time, worn away by Ethan's obvious happiness and Linda's quiet dignity. Eleanor pulled Linda aside earlier, her voice thick with emotion. "I was wrong about you. I judged you without knowing you. Grace would have liked you. She would have been grateful her son found this." Linda's evolution over these 6 months is visible in ways both large and small. She went back to school part-time, pursuing her nurse practitioner degree with Julian's financial support, though she insisted on framing it as a low-interest loan because pride still matters to her and Julian agreed to preserve that dignity. She still works at the hospital, but the shifts are manageable now, not drowning, not desperate. Every debt is paid off, that crushing weight of red notices and final warnings lifted from her shoulders. She visits Marcus's grave regularly with Sophie, bringing flowers and sitting on the grass while Sophie talks to her father about her life. Linda teaches her daughter that new connections don't erase old love, that hearts expand rather than replace. She's found her voice in ways she never had before, speaking up in meetings, setting boundaries, taking up space without apologizing. The woman who once made herself small to survive now stands tall. Julian's change is the quietest, but perhaps the deepest. He's relearned how to be present, actually present, not just physically in the room while his mind works through business problems. He cut his work hours drastically, delegated responsibilities, stopped treating his company like it was more important than his life. He actually knows his son again, knows that Ethan's favorite color is green now instead of blue, knows he likes peanut butter sandwiches cut diagonally, knows he has nightmares about 3 times a month and needs to talk them through. Julian started therapy himself, working through his grief and guilt with a professional who doesn't let him hide behind his billions. He created a foundation in Grace's name supporting single parents facing sudden loss, providing financial assistance and counseling and community. Linda serves on the board, her perspective invaluable. Julian looks at Linda sometimes across the dinner table when she's laughing at something Sophie said and wonders if someday, maybe, when they're both ready and it wouldn't complicate what they've built, if something more could develop between them. But for now, this chosen family arrangement is enough. It's actually everything. The final moment of the party comes when Sophie stands in front of her cake, 7 candles flickering in the golden afternoon light. Everyone gathers around singing happy birthday, voices blending together, and Sophie closes her eyes to make her wish. After the cake is eaten and the presents opened, she climbs into Julian's lap, something she started doing about 3 months ago that makes him tear up every single time because this child chose to trust him, chose to let him be important in her life. She whispers into his ear, her small voice carrying a secret. "Thank you for letting me keep my $47.32. I didn't need it after all. You couldn't be bought, but you showed up anyway." Julian's eyes fill with tears. He asks the question everyone asks at birthday parties. "What did you wish for, sweetheart?" Sophie grins, that beautiful smile that lights up her whole face. "I can't tell or it won't come true. But I think maybe it already did." The camera, if there were one, would pull back in this moment to show the full picture. 2 children laughing over a board game on the grass, their heads close together, best friends who saved each other. 2 adults watching with cautious hope and healing hearts, learning that family isn't always built from biology or romance, but sometimes from courage and choice and showing up daily. A family built not from convention, but from one impossible question in a shopping mall, proving that sometimes the most beautiful things in life can't be bought with any amount of money. They can only be chosen, day after day, until choosing becomes loving. And that's it. That's the story of how a little girl's impossible question became everyone's second chance. If you felt something, anything, watching these 4 humans learn to be a family, then you understand what Olivia the Storyteller is all about. We tell stories about real emotions, about people who choose courage over comfort, about healing that looks messy and imperfect and absolutely beautiful. Hit that subscribe button because we post these stories 3 times a week and you don't want to miss them. And to those of you who watched this entire story without subscribing, I have to know, what would it take? What do I have to do? Sing, dance, beg. Comment below and tell me what you need to see before you'll join this community, because honestly, I'm running out of ideas and also kind of impressed by your resistance. Thank you for being here. Share this story with someone who needs to believe in second chances. I'll see you in the next one.